All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my first Strategic Priorities, Communications, and Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee meeting for Thursday, November 28th, 2024. Before we call to order, I would like to introduce Melanie Bailey, who is joining our team here as a Strategic Initiatives Officer. Do I have that correct? Thank you. So Melanie will be joining us from periodically when we have issues or when we have strategic initiatives that we'll be talking about. So welcome, Melanie. I'm also new to the committee, so I guess it's an introduction of myself and also to Melanie. And I don't think we have anybody else new here, although Alana thought she was new, but Alana, you're here nonetheless. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none. Do I have an approval of the agenda? Moved by the mayor, second by Councillor or Deputy Mayor Yankoff. This is going to be, I need to get used to the different people in the room. Do we have an approval of the minutes from October 31st, 2024? Okay, so moving forward, we will get into any discussion items and reports. So our first report is the Municipal Electoral Officer City of Charlottetown report, which will be presented by Dan Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. As you may recall, back in 23, we had some correspondence from the PI, elections PI, who had been acting as our chief our municipal electoral officer, and he had expressed some concerns about continuing to act. In the ensuing months, we've had a number of discussions with staff at elections PEI. And as the report outlines, we really support, or we feel that the support that Elections PEI provides in conducting our municipal elections is invaluable and, quite frankly, irreplaceable. So we've worked diligently with staff there to kind of identify what the resistance points were in terms of continuing to act as our electoral officers, and I think at this stage they're receptive to perhaps having a discussion about coming back on board. So this report is essentially asking Council to make the request formally through a resolution at Council to have Elections PEI consider acting again as our municipal electoral officer.
Great, thank you for that, Dan. I think that's obviously a great step forward. We certainly want to continue to foster good relationships and partnerships with Elections PEI for the municipal procedures. So I would encourage members here in this room to move that forward and to allow us to continue those communications and discussions with Elections PEI hopeful for a successful outcome and continued relationship and partnership to deliver those services. Thank you. So do I have any other questions on that particular topic?
No, I'll move the resolution.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown. Second by Deputy Mayor Yankoff. Thank you, Dan.
No, resolution's on the floor?
Pardon me?
The resolution's on the floor?
Oh, you would like to speak to the
So
resolution?
is there a timeline that we're looking at, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think in speaking with Dan, I think, that's something that's moving forward quickly. We wanted to continue those ongoing discussions and collaboration with Elections PEI. So I believe Dan, and you can speak to that, I think it will move this forward to our next council meeting, December 10th, I think it is. So the expectation is to have it there by December 10th, have that outcome, and then continue those discussions going forward.
Perfect.
Yep. Does that summarize that, Dan, for you? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to jump back up to the agenda here quickly. We have another report, which is the bylaw refresh update presented by Melanie. So Melanie, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Director Jenkins and our CAO for the direction and support in making all of this work possible, what will be discussed today. Thank you again, Chair and Your Worship and Deputy Mayor Yankoff. I'm thankful to be here with you today and for the opportunity to work on a project of importance for Council and the City and each standing committee. To give some context and response to questions that have been raised, and then to clarify the project as was recommended in the last standing committee meeting. Just to provide context initially, that while this bylaw project is one of many priorities, it is the most pressing and will have dedicated focus and support, with other priorities a distant second until we have strong progress in this work. This discussion today will focus on 3 parts. First, placing that in context within strategic initiatives briefly. Second, what I heard you through previous committee and council sessions recommend, and what I heard from our 35 staff through one-on-one consultations and 3 large group meetings. All of this work has been grounded with their expertise and recommendations, core city staff experts, department heads, directors, committee leads, and those that have expertise in each of these topics, bylaw, municipal, the MGA, and other legislation. Third, I'll open the floor up to you, and I hope that you'll be able to provide some feedback and recommendations that will help me strengthen this plan. Very briefly, this bylaw priority project sits within the corporate priorities. So strategic priorities are both corporate and organizational priorities, where a priority overlaps multiple teams or organizations and is deemed urgent or important, and a coordinating function is needed. So within corporate priorities, there's a number of priorities that I'll be focused on, but right now the primary and sole focus is getting these bylaws moved and advanced. So to move directly into that, to start, just some guiding principles. So these are your bylaws. Our intent is to reflect council priorities. We were given advice, and we take this to heart, to not overcomplicate. That bylaws are the easiest, quickest, and fastest things to change, unlike acts and regulations, with exception of those that are new and complex, which will require more research. Results over perfection, to move quickly, with the exception of those that require more research. And it is important to move quickly on bylaws that require a minor refresh, to reserve time and effort for those that are new and where major changes are recommended. And that we have 12 months, 11 months now, and we do need to move quickly. To set this context around why this is so important, and to set the initial context, is that it is a response to growth. One, the context and the work and the urgency behind it is the rapid acceleration of growth in just a few years. And one, the necessity to improve efficiencies during a time of significant need and opportunity. And 2, bylaws that directly respond to significant needs as a result of growth, whether housing or infrastructure. So all bylaws fit within this category and are direct response to growth. Action and moving quickly will enable us to create some progress and momentum in advance of more difficult bylaws coming to discussion in the new year. Now, in keeping with that sense of urgency, we've moved quickly in November. You'll see the list there. Essentially, all subject experts were consulted with. 3 large group meetings were held. There are more consultations to finish. This is part of the consultation process to gather feedback. Each feedback session allows us to refine this plan. There, highlighted is the meeting here today, so we have advanced well on this list. Project scope, communications, defining different roles, determining rapid, simple bylaw updates versus the more complex research. So that is underway, and we are moving closer to setting the plan in motion. And this is a quick checkpoint before that happens. So just to briefly simplify, I'll go through the priority bylaws and where they fit, and then I will open it up to the priority bylaws plus the minor change bylaws that are required to integrate MGA and to integrate the enforcement bylaw, to align ourselves with those. So we have our priority bylaws that take precedence, and in the downtime between research or when time allows, we hope to move quickly on the minor change bylaws. So very briefly, first, the priority bylaws. You'll see not all standing committees have one. Under finance, audit, and tendering, there's 3. The sponsor for that are the Councillor McLear, Deputy Mayor Yankoff, and Councillor Bernard. As well, we've defined who our committee support is, who our department heads are, who our directors are. So those are our communication channels for reviewing, with the exception of bylaws such as procurement, which is a priority for all of council. So a feedback loop will be developed where all of council is able to provide input while we're doing research, and we can integrate all of those recommendations. Of course, the standing committee is the sponsor for discussions and integrating those recommendations. Parks and Rec has their new park usage bylaw, planning and heritage, the zoning bylaw, and the patio bylaw. Under protective and emergency services, we have the emergency measures bylaw. Public Works, the community standards. This will integrate 2 existing bylaws, potentially more, the dangerous and hazardous properties and the nuisance bylaw. Strategic priorities here today, we will be working on the procedural bylaw and the council code of conduct. We are aware of priorities that council has, immediate priorities. Some priorities will require some additional time, whether with legal or through consultations with council. So we will build the timelines in accordance to that. I'll just mention with this committee, there's 2 pieces. We are sponsoring the procedural bylaw and the council code of conduct, but we're also sponsoring this entire project. And so some discussions around supports other committees will need or prioritizing other committees' bylaws will be a discussion that I'll look to you to provide direction and support with. With the refresh, with the priority and minor, so I'll just go into a slightly more detail, again, keeping this very high level and then opening it up for questions later. In red are the priority bylaws we have just discussed. And also within that are those that are already finished, those that are being considered as a minor and quick change where MGA or the enforcement bylaw need to be integrated. There are staff that have been doing this work. This is business as usual. We're just going to coordinate the piece, move it through quickly. Meanwhile, I'm doing the necessary research for the priority bylaws and taking into account recommendations that have already come forward. Looking at, for example, in economic, tourism, and cultural development, there is a business improvement area bylaw that required a refresh to the MGA and also an updated GIS map. Within a few hours, that was done through Cindy. So that's the prototype, that's the example of what we're looking for the rapid, to give us some momentum and to give us some familiarity with the process while research on more complex bylaws continues. Under environment and sustainability, there's several that would need to be updated for the MGA. Under finance, audit, and tendering, there is the 3 priorities, but within that, there are some that have been finished, a few that say they're being considered for next year, but have also been finished. So that will be updated, and we'll look at what we can move quickly and prioritize the ones that will take more time. I'm hopeful the fee bylaws may be a quick action, so that will take a priority off of our list while the research happens on the other 2. I'll just mention too, while one may be a priority, there may be time, there may be restraints. So for example, capital construction, early in the winter, there's a consultant, they've been working with Public Works. So, council will need to hear the report, the findings, the recommendations before we can even consider a bylaw. So that's an example of how some will take a bit more time and others can be moved more quickly. Under HR is the staffing bylaw for discussion, if that can be moved quickly. I don't believe it can, and so therefore, if it can't be, it'll be moved to the priority list for next year for voting, for your determination. Under Parks, Recreation, and Leisure, again, naming the sponsor, each of the committee members under that committee, the bylaws that are there, as well as some notes. And again, some say they need to be updated but have been, so that will be adjusted. So this is where you end up with bylaws that connect into the priority bylaw. So in this case, the Parks Usage bylaw is new. That will take time to develop. But when it is updated, either the Victoria Park and Promenade bylaw will need to be updated to reference it, or that bylaw will need to merge into parks and usage. So just to keep some visibility on that and other actions that will need to happen once the park usage bylaw is processed. Under planning and heritage, of course, the zoning and development bylaw that's been through a lot of discussion as we move into the spring and potential next steps. Of course, planning and heritage is leading that process with their consultant. If any next steps emerge around public engagement where I can assist, that's where the strategic initiatives can step in to support them. But again, it's up to their direction in what they need help with, and so far they have got this process well organized within themselves. As well, the patio bylaw. The patio bylaw will take the COVID-19 patio bylaw and update that to current state. It's important to govern the parking spaces, the ability for commercial businesses to have patios there in existing parking spaces. There is some discussion on whether other bylaws can merge into that. So those discussions will happen, we'll determine the work scope, and then we'll set the next steps with, of course, planning and heritage also working on that currently. A number of those within this list, some may not be on the priority list, but will have to be worked on alongside the zoning and development bylaw. And again, that's all governed through the Planning Act and what fits within that and within the zoning and development bylaw requirements. A few can be updated just to current enforcement, in particular, standards. That was passed, the amended enforcement bylaw, passed in August 2024. So that of course, is a critical priority, bringing in the enforcement bylaws to allow the enforcement of a number of these bylaws listed that aren't currently updated with that. So that is also on that quick minor fix priority list. Under that is protective and emergency services, and within that is the emergency measures bylaw. Obviously very important. However, on hold currently, pending direction from the provincial government. So as they receive that over the next, hopefully, few months, then we'll go into a meeting and determine what those recommended steps are and move that back to discussion around potential next steps and what a bylaw could look like. Within this one, the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly premises bylaw, this and the nuisance bylaw were on the priority list. They were merged into the community standards bylaw and moved to a different standing committee. However, there is no time to wait. So this is a two-step process. The protective emergency services needs our help very nearly number one on the list to move the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly premises changes forward to provide more efficiency to that committee and provide more direction to staff on what they are able to do. By reducing the time that these discussions are in standing committee, that will free them up for more important discussions and to expedite other bylaws. So that is top of list to move that forward and to help that committee. Within this, the policing services bylaw, so this was another prototype, the second one. So through Tracy's support, again within 20 to 30 minutes, that was updated. So again, those are where the MGA is needed and the MGA alignment and the enforcement bylaw. So we know there's some that can move quickly, and that is another example. Under public works, there is that community standards bylaw talked about. So we'll start with the dangerous and hazardous bylaw, get that updated, and then in the next step or third step process, we'll merge that with nuisance and work with you and get your feedback around what that community standards would look like, those bylaws plus more. Under strategic priorities, we already discussed, and under water and sewer utility, there's a priority not on the list this year. It will take extensive work, so that will move to the list of recommendations that can be voted on for the next round of priorities. As we move forward, you may raise additional requirements as well as staff have. So I am keeping documentation on recommendations that could be considered for future priority bylaws where there's some complexity and where research is needed. So the next steps in December is after speaking with you and gathering your feedback. I'm hoping that the mayor and CAO may allow a special meeting of council where we can bring the project to them and gather their feedback before we begin sending review requests. Following feedback from the committee here today, we'll update the plan and share again back with all of the staff that have been part of helping me create this. We'll initiate the draft recommendations, we'll set timelines in place, we'll make sure we understand exact work scope per bylaw, the rapid moving and the slower, more time that will take, and the steps that will be required. Just on the newer complex bylaws, that as those come to surface, we will send to committee and council for some that impact all, to allow time for them to provide the feedback that's needed while we're researching it, and then to bring those two pieces together. On the area of minor change bylaws in alignment with the MGA or the enforcement bylaw, these can be made in-house, amended very quickly, and sent back to committee for review. At which time you may discover you want to make additional changes, so we can either move that bylaw through quickly to provide that enforcement piece and MGA alignment and put it back on the list for additional work later, or you can send it back to us and we can put it on the list for additional work later. So with that, I thank you for your time and allowing me to bring this plan, and I will turn it back to you, Chair, and look forward to your feedback.
Great. Thank you very much, Melanie. It was a very comprehensive and detailed strategy put together to help us or to help guide us through this process. So very much appreciated. Before I open up the floor for questions, I know you're seeking our feedback. One of the things that when I'm reviewing this that came to mind for me was the progress reporting, and how that would look from a perspective of not only internally to staff and to the leadership team, but also to council. I know you may not have been here at the time, but there, some of these priority updates to bylaws, some of them have garnered a lot of discussion and attention here in the chamber. So it would be nice to have some form of, I'll just say quarterly reporting or on an ongoing basis, just in the way of which things are moving forward. And you have that somewhat going here right now, where things are. But if we could get some form of summary that could be provided in our monthly package under either our committee here or under each of the individual committees as to where things are as a report. Now, I guess I'd have to go to the committee level and then likely be brought up through the package, but I'll let you guys sort out how that would be done. That's just a recommendation that I would note in the bottom. I would also like to acknowledge that you did make reference to I want to make sure I say the right name, the construction bylaw, that we did have a lot of discussion and debate about, but I think you qualified that with, that is something that's still yet to come to council and decisions, but in the event that decisions are made, then that is something that we would continue. So I know that Deputy Mayor, you brought that up on the last meeting, so thank you for clarifying that, because I'm sure it would be like we didn't discuss this or we didn't agree upon this, but I think your clarification helps us to understand that better, so thank you. Welcome, Councillor McKinnon. No problem, that's fair. So that's kind of my observations there. I just, again, want to recognize the great work done in this. It's, like I say, it's very detailed, very comprehensive. I think it's got a great project schedule here of what we are to expect. Certainly, having experience in these areas myself, I know that things can change and there's ebbs and flows, and we'll try to aim for these deadlines and dates, but they certainly, until you get into these, you realize how much work there are and what changes are needed. So, of course, you talked about some of the minor changes that can be done very quickly. Some changes will have to go in concert with other changes in the Planning Act and so on and so forth. So recognizing that. So again, thank you. I'll open up the floor for any questions regarding the presentation.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Yeah.
Sure.
Go. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your mic.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Sorry, Deputy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the capital constructions bylaw. No need for me to now, but I reiterate exactly what the Chair said, that, until we see the report that staff went and did, the council can't really decide if that's a priority or not. As for the patio bylaw, that's an interesting little story in itself. You have it under planning and heritage, but it actually from my understanding, it falls under three different committees, departments. Public Works talks about it, Protective Services talks about it, and the only involvement that Planning and Heritage ever had was during the pandemic when they opened up and allowed private properties to take some of their parking spaces and create a patio for social distancing. It had nothing to do with the patios that go up and down Queen Street and all the other side streets. That always sat with Protective Services. So I think there's been a lot of confusion around who's on first and what is actually happening with this. Because my understanding from Police and Protective Services, that this has been sitting with legal for up to 18 to 20 months. So there's a lot of confusion around, where the ownership for this bylaw is. So just putting it out there that there's been no discussion with Planning and Heritage Committee about anything except for the COVID patios, which are long since not considered COVID patios anymore. I don't know if I have anything more to add to that, but that's what I know on the patios.
Thank you, Deputy, for your comments, and I'm sure that Melanie will take those under consideration and advisement. Your Worship?
Mr. Chair, maybe I missed it, but we did have lots of discussion over the last 4 or 5 years about the summary offense ticketing bylaw. And that actually intertwines with a couple of standing committees and departments. First, it would be, if I look under planning, it has zoning bylaw, patio bylaw. But we've been asking over the last number of years to have a summary offense ticketing bylaw, so if Todd or Elizabeth, or bylaw enforcement officers, go to a home and there's a patio built or an accessory building without a permit, that there is a warning or a fine. Then we also took it to police, because police or protective services are responsible for the bylaw for dangerous, hazardous, unsightly premises. And we had this discussion the other day, and there was the issue about, well, we still have to go back to council when there is a issue, because we don't have those other powers to enforce our summary offense ticketing bylaw. But Melanie, if you go to the switch bylaw that we passed in 2020, and I'm at it right now, under Section 7, it has a section that refers to liens. So the municipality in this bylaw has the powers to put a lien against a property if the owner or the person that borrowed the money from the switch program did not repay, because under 6.6, there's a number of areas where the CAO has to identify to apply that lien. So if we can apply the lien under the switch bylaw, and the discussion we had the other day at Protective and Emergency Service Standing Committee, we didn't have that power, but we have it in the switch bylaw. So we have to try to figure out, again, the reason I bring this up, Mr. Chair, every month, why are these properties back in front of us? I thought we were going to address this through a summary offense ticketing bylaw. That's what I thought. That's what I keep saying. But I keep finding out that we can't do it because we don't have these additional powers to enforce a fine. And again, I think we all know that, 100% of fines that are administered or sent out, I'd say 95+% are paid. It's those, that small percentage that we have to take care of through other means of getting the payment from them. So could we look into that, please? Because I keep, my brother always said when he sat in this council for 14 years, it's not the question you ask, it's the question you're going to ask to get the answer that you're looking for. So the answer I'm looking for is, if we can do it under the switch bylaw for a lien under Section 7, 7.1, and I think it goes to 7.2, right up to 7.5. So, and the lien also can charge the total charge plus interest on the lien. And someone said it, I think, at our meeting for the protective services, well, someone that has their house for 20 years and doesn't sell it, that lien's there. Yeah, but if you go for a banking credit or you go for a loan, that lien shows up on your record. And the bank will say, pay off the lien before we forward you any new money under a loan or a line of credit. So can we look into that, please? And the other area of concern I have is at the last meeting when we looked at the list, they weren't prioritized, right? But I'm continually prioritizing the procurement bylaw. And I know our director of finance, our CFO, is working on this to get something back to us, but that's a priority for me because soon as we draw those parameters on how we can go out to tender and how we receive those tenders, that we have a framework. And that framework is not a two-page policy, it's a comprehensive procurement bylaw. And again, I give credit to the director, Director Dan Jenkins, for continually hearing this at finance, council, everywhere he goes in the hallway, procurement bylaw. So that's a priority for me, of the 10 that we listed.
So I'm going to let Melanie have an opportunity to respond to some of your questions or statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Your Worship, I appreciate those comments. And I want to just ask a few more questions. The first piece around the summary enforcement. So my understanding is the summary enforcement was replaced with the new amended enforcement bylaw of August 27th, 2024. These were some of those minor changes. I was mentioning it clearly outlines what we need to do. We need to make those changes, which will give the ability to enforce a number of existing bylaws. Okay, good. Regarding the lien and that piece, I did hear your standing committee, and that was a fulsome and very helpful discussion. So I've thought a bit about it and had some conversations this morning. And so the dangerous and hazardous goods, there's two parts. One is the relief to the committee by making those minor changes to allow staff an ability to respond to needs quickly and timely and to limit the amount of time and effort and discussion that has to go to council. So there's that piece. But there's a second piece that you spoke to, Mayor, and that's around that research. And I'll look into the switch and the lien. I was under the impression the lien was possible when a bill isn't paid for a property that is cleaned up by the city. Some conversations happened already, in other provinces. Maybe some places can interact with the province. There's some limitations here, and it's an entire IT system of data that has to be collected that then has to interface with the provincial data system and the cost that would require in order to pull in and seek provincial support in enforcing potentially, like the mayor said previously, with the province, if you don't pay your property tax, you don't pay your parking tickets, you can't renew your driver's license. There are significant ramifications that help bring forward payments which the municipality doesn't have. So there is some additional research there to be done, and so the decision will then go to the committee. Do we want to move quickly to expedite the change under Section 8 to allow, to limit the time in council, and then do the research later, or do we want to do both at the same time? So those are exactly the type of questions to be had. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I'd also like to just comment on the point of prioritization. So during one of our council meetings, we had a lengthy discussion on the prioritization, and I think there was a lot of confusion around 1 to 10, what things would start. But I think what came out of that, and I did make point of that evening, I think what came out of that was the understanding that a lot of these would work concurrently, and that, because there are different departments working on different ones. But it was very clear, I think, in speaking for council and mayor, that the procurement bylaw certainly is that one. So, you know, if at the very least, if we're not going to do anything, we need to be working on that one. If I know we're going to be working on all of them. But given circumstances that may occur, that is one, that I think, I'm not speaking for the finance committee here. I'm speaking on behalf of me as a council member, in my views as to that being one that I would support too, as being our number one priority. But understanding we concurrently we're working on a lot of these. So going back to that reporting, I think there will be an expectation that, we're seeing progress on some of these, but more importantly, on the procurement bylaw. So I'll leave it at that, but I just wanted to support your comments on the procurement bylaw and the discussion we had. I know, Melanie, you might not have had the benefit of being there during that time, and appreciate that. And I'm sure Dan has briefed you, but, that's where we kind of stand. So,
Just to follow up, Mr. Chair?
sure,
know,
then I
that-
think- yeah.
That's on record now. You're supporting what I'm saying.
Yes, in that particular, this one particular incident. Okay, thank you. Mr. McKinnon, would you have any questions? I know you're just joining, but I didn't want to put you in the spot, but I also want to give you an opportunity to speak to. So Melanie, I guess, I know you're asking for some recommendations. I know we've had a couple here. I hope that you've been able to capture those. Is there anybody else that would like to leave any feedback or recommendations around?
Just a follow-up?
No. The mayor
So,
would like to-
Melanie, you did refer to the enforcement bylaw. I have it here in front of me. And I think this came up during our discussion about this enforcement bylaw, because I cross-pollinated with the summary offense ticketing bylaw, which I thought was going to be more specific to the dangerous, on-sitely hazardous bylaw, because that is where we're having the issue. But if you look at the enforcement bylaw, they still have items in there under 3.5A, keeping livestock. 3.5D, permitting livestock to run at large. 3.6A, keeping animals or birds causing a disturbance. Like, some of these, I think this was pointed out by Councillor McCabe, some of these issues or some of these actions, I think probably pertain to when the city was amalgamating and going beyond its little borders of Belvedere Avenue and west out to not even out to West Royal, but it was the old city. So that has to be cleaned up. There has to be a comprehensive review of that. But also, how does it interrelate with the enforcement bylaw that should have in it, if you build an accessory building or you add to your existing dwelling without a permit, this is the fine, a minimum and a maximum, right? Because that's what it has. What it has here is first offense and subsequent offense. But I know when we were going through the bylaw regarding unlicensed premises back in 2000, early 2000, the chief had to make sure that there was a minimum fine and a maximum fine, because the courts have to rule on whether they go minimum or maximum. So that, there's a lot of stuff a lot of language has to be cleaned up. So I know it's there. I thought the summary offense ticketing bylaw was to amend those areas, those actions, like permitting livestock to run at large. Well, what could that be? A cow or a horse? There's so many items in that existing bylaw, I think, that we have to review and maybe look at best practices in other municipalities. Maybe they still have 3.5D permitting livestock to run at large in Halifax. I don't know, but
Can I just,
could we just take an opportunity to review that? And again, I know that you love to. I know it's part of your way of doing business or doing your work is to look at best practices in other communities.
can I just have just a point here in the sense of, when I appreciate the comments in that particular sense. However, when I look at this, Melanie's coming to us here from a project perspective. This is how the project. Would these comments be better suited during each of the committee meetings that are affected, so the other members of that committee can weigh in on? I respect
Oh, yeah,
that you're a
no.
part of all of those committee meetings, but
Yeah.
for me here today, I think for this committee, it is more on adopting, I think Melanie is asking for blessing here today to move this forward, this project, this bylaw refresh project. Is that correct? That was one of your bullets on the top of your slide.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and approval to come to a special meeting of
Yes,
council.
exactly. So we will do that here just momentarily. I want to give Councillor McKinnon an opportunity, but not to discredit your comments. I think could you have the opportunity during each year's, and Melanie, it may be best, like, are you attending a lot of the various committee meetings that have these priority bylaw amendments and changes so that you can hear firsthand from other members of that, what those perceived changes would be?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will be, and priorities, recommendations, like what the mayor, your worship, has specified, will get documented, and so those committees might be aware that that's a conversation to come. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say, no discredit. I repeat and repeat. I'm an educator, so the key to learning is repetition.
Okay. But so the point of that wasn't to stop you, it was just more to say, can we also have that at each of them where these are being discussed? So that there is a wholesome discussion around the bylaws within those committee areas and department areas. Because I could sit here and weigh in on all of them, but that's one personal opinion of them all, and I think that would be a good approach. So just a recommendation. Again, you asked for recommendations. I'm just providing some feedback. Dan?
Thanks, Chair. And I think that's one of the big benefits of having Melanie lead this project, is that she's going to be reaching out to
Each of the
committees, department heads, staff, who all have little tidbits to add to these bylaws and policies. And she's going to be collecting as she goes, scouring everybody's wisdom in terms of enforcement bylaws, and do we need something to prevent livestock from moving? So it will be, and that's why it's important to engage both with council and staff, and where there's stakeholders, in things like the patio bylaw, we'll have to engage with folks who are operating patios and have an interest in that. So, but it's great to have her as a resource to manage this project, to compile and suck all this information in, and hopefully we can apply it in a way that is presentable and understandable to committees and council, and bring forward bylaws that are detailed enough that include most of these areas of concern or areas for improvement, and we'll end up with some finished
That'd be
products here
key.
in the next 12 months.
Okay, great, thank you. We're all on the same. I'm just going to give Councillor McKinnon just an opportunity to see you buzzed in there for a bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you kind of clarified a couple of comments that you said, Your Worship. A couple of the sections that you had pointed out there with livestock, I wasn't sure what you meant when you said clean them up, or if you're requesting that she remove them, because we still do have livestock in here. We still do have people with birds that shouldn't be on them in certain parts of the city. So, question, I guess, to the chair, and maybe it's to the police. So tickets that are written here under the Summary Proceedings Act, does the municipality keep the revenue for them tickets? Or does that go to the province? Would that be protective?
Nope. Sorry.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor McKinnon. To the best of my knowledge, the revenue does accrue to the city for the tickets that we write. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, no, not for the bylaws, for the, yeah,
Yes, including
the traffic tickets and
bylaws.
stuff and
Yes.
stuff like that does come, the revenue comes to the city as income.
That's my
Okay.
understanding.
Yeah, so, and to your point earlier, like if somebody, and Melanie touched on this, so that if you don't pay the ticket, yes, they can't renew their driver's license, they can't renew their registration, city taxes, everything that has to be taken care of, so the revenue will come through eventually, but, okay, no, that's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Deputy Mayor Yankoff?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I know we're asking, the recommendation is to move this on to a special meeting of council. I just want to make sure that if we're moving this on to council, we're looking at some of these items that we've earmarked as either incorrect or not accurate. And for example, would be, are we going to have the clarification about where this patio bylaw sits before we go to a special meeting of council? Because right now, if I was to call up the manager of protective services, I can assure you, police would say that it falls under them. And if I was to call Public Works, they would say that there's part of that that falls there. So I just want to make sure that when we go to a special meeting of council, we have that clarity. And the reason I bring this one up so often is it's very dear to my heart, because I've been screaming from the top of my lungs on it for about 18 months. So I just want to make sure that we know where it lives before we get to that special meeting of council. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. I think that we could certainly put that down as a task item or an action item, sorry, to address that. Likely, I think it's been said, it has to internalize where that actually lies and take that responsibility for that particular one. So can we leave that with you guys to sort that out? You're not going to sort that out today here, but I'm sure there'll be some discussion. So Melanie, if you'd like to comment, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, Deputy Mayor Yankoff, with your comment, I noted that there is still some pieces to figure out, so I'll get that figured out before any special meeting of council. Absolutely. And we've also noted there's a couple legal questions you've had for a while, so Dan has sent off some messages to legal to get some updates on that as well. So if you think of anything else that needs clarification or cleaning up before council, I invite you to reach out through email. Thanks.
Okay. Well,
If I
Mr.
may,
Chair, just a point of clarification.
point of clarification. Go ahead, your worship.
Again, Councillor McKinnon, I just want to clarify, can you clarify what you asked? For example, withholding license without withholding registration. Municipality-wise, we don't have those powers, right? But under the switch program, the switch bylaw, we can put liens on properties. But I don't know if that's something we were able to do for, let's say, not paying a ticket for, no, let's say, not, if we did have the action in our enforcement bylaw, if someone built an accessory dwelling and we find that person, he or she did not pay, I don't think we have any powers that we can force them to pay it. But we do under the switch program.
Okay, so I'm going to put that on the motion on the floor. Sorry, Dan, did you have a?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Just a point of clarification, Councillor Yankoff, through the chair. In terms of bringing items to the special meeting of council, I think Melanie would want to bring this plan to the special meeting of council. The question of where the patio bylaw resides probably will not be resolved before the plan comes to the special meeting of council, but before a draft bylaw, new bylaw comes to council, certainly the question of where that resides would be resolved at that, well in advance of that. But there's a lot of research, there's a lot of engagement with, we listed 3 committees, three departments that are directly involved in the patio issue right now. We won't resolve those by the next special meeting of council. And Melanie does want to get the endorsement of council in terms of, this is really about approach and process in terms of how we want to proceed. And a lot of these details will be worked out as we go. But this is really about launching the project management side of what's happening and the issues, specific issues, whether it's livestock in the city or which department and which committee the patio bylaw that might come will reside, will be worked out in due course as this work unfolds. So I just wanted to be clear that.
So, yeah, and that's sort of the point, Dan, that I tried to make earlier. I think what we're here is from the project perspective. We want to say this is the project. So all those details can be worked out at the committee levels but for the purpose of possibly just to minimize maybe some confusion at this special meeting, I would request that on the construction bylaw, we just put a double asterisk beside it and say, you know, the preamble that you had, which was, this is not a bylaw at this point in time, council, and then when it comes to the patio one again, could you put the same double asterisk, just so that that preamble of that is something that is being worked on, and we'll focus this on the project work more so than the detail of what's inside, but not getting lost on what deputy's asking for on this will get worked out at the specific areas. So, okay, so Councillor McKinnon, do you have another question?
Not a question, just.
Or a comment, sorry.
Just a comment, yeah. No, I apologize, I wasn't clear enough on my thing. It's the provincial acts and regulations. Those tickets are the ones that get good for the licenses and our bylaws. I wasn't aware that the switch was part of it, so when we're writing our bylaws, that'd be something that it'd be nice if we
preference,
can write that in there for all of our bylaws and have the same effect.
So again, that goes back to the detail, right? We'll iron that, or the appropriate department area will iron that out. That's not this is not this committee to determine that. We're the stewards of these at the end of the day, I would assume, and then we will move those forward. What's that? Sorry. Okay. So I will put a motion on the floor to, oh, sorry, I don't see your mic there. You're kind of.
Yeah,
looking
sorry,
behind me,
I
so
know.
my
Yeah.
apologies.
And just to clarify, I wasn't trying to get into the weeds. I was just trying to point out that if this is the project plan, then perhaps where it is sitting is not really accurate as a project plan because it may not necessarily belong there. So that's really what I was pointing out was.
So can we put that double asterisk
Yep.
to just for the purpose
As long
of,
as that's there, yep.
to go into the next discussion, so we don't spend a half hour talking about where it belongs, right? We know that needs to be adjusted, so let's do that.
I'll
and
move the
then-
motion. I'll move the
Just so I
resolution.
have it, sorry, okay.
Yeah, just to further the chair's comments, many of these allocations and responsibilities are placeholders for the most part. This is a working document, and it'll change over the weeks and months ahead. But we want to kind of place things so we can track them and move them forward and get going on them. But point well taken.
So I will, again, put the motion on the floor. Do I have someone to move that?
No, you can't put the motion on the floor. I'm putting the motion on the floor.
Oh, you are,
Yeah,
sorry,
You can break the
okay.
tie.
Yes,
And this is a
that's
living document, a
Sorry.
living document. I move it.
Okay, moved by Mayor Brown, second by our Deputy Mayor Yankoff. I apologize. All in favor? Very good. So thank you very much, Melanie, appreciate it. Great work on the report, and look forward to working through this in our committee work. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, James, back there. We need to, any new business? Moving on, sorry, to the agenda. Mayor Brown has left us. Is there any new business rising from the meeting? None? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Councilor McKinnon, Deputy Mayor Yankoff, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.